On today's show, so you're telling me there's a chance.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holtby. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, they have a new coach in Chocolatetown. Derek King takes over. What to expect from Derek King and the Hershey Bears next season. A bit later, we'll talk about the legend of Braden Holtby, the save from 2018, things that will be permanently etched in my mind forever. The save. And for the remainder of the summer, from time to time, I'm going to do a look back. And in this episode, I'm going to take a look back on my favorite Capitals netminder, Braden Holtby. But just to get it going here, we're going to talk about, so you're telling me there's a chance. I'm telling you there is a chance that Logan Thompson could be in the Olympics for Team Canada, albeit I'm going to say a remote chance. In the most recent episode of the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliotte Friedman said that just because a player was not invited to the orientation in Calgary doesn't mean that they cannot. There's still a possibility that they could join the Olympic team. If you're asking me, I think it is a remote possibility. I think that if you take a look at Team Canada, and how Logan Thompson got snubbed in the Four Nations, and you take a look at him not getting invited to that orientation, that it is all sorts of awkward, and it would need to be quite an about face for Logan Thompson to get in there. And I just ultimately think the decision makers would not let that happen. But let's dive into that in segment number 1. So you're telling me there's a chance. I am telling you there is a chance, albeit a remote chance, like I said off the top there. So Hockey Canada released their 42-man roster for the national team orientation camp later this month. And, well, Tom Wilson made the cut. He will be at least at the orientation for Team Canada, and ultimately good for him. As we know, he was yet another Capitals player that was snubbed for the Four Nations face-off. But the buzz, it's not about who made it. It's about who didn't. And I think you know who I'm referring to here. Logan Thompson, Capitals goalie, top 4 in Vezina voted, carried the Capitals to the top of the Eastern Conference, was not invited. And if you want to understand the outrage, take a look at his record from last season: 31-6-6, a .910 save percentage in the regular season, a .917 save percentage in the playoff, 4th in Vezina voting. What more does he need to do? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I think it has to do with the decision makers. I think it has to do with some of his former coaches. And at the end of the day, I don't think there is much a conspiracy theory associated. You take a look at it. Canada brought 3 goalies to camp: Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, and Sam Montembeault. Thompson outplayed all of them last season and got snubbed. It's not conspiracy theory. I tried to make it sound like that in the last episode, kind of in jest, but I mean, take a look at it. It's about numbers. How is it that he got overlooked? I mean, just take a look, beating head-to-head against Montembeault in the first round of the playoffs. Had better regular season numbers, and he didn't get the nod. So that is where it gets interesting. And like I said, Elliotte Friedman chimed in and said, technically, these 42 players aren't the final roster. Canada can, as a matter of fact, add players during the season, but it gets a little bit tricky the later this whole thing drags on. Olympic eligibility has to start now. You've got to get into the drug testing protocol early. He said it's not something you can do like a week or two before the Olympic event. Some players have already been involved this summer, earlier in the summer, that if they are going to go in the direction of Logan Thompson, they're going to have to do it now than later. But like I said, it would be quite an about face for Team Canada. And it's no secret there's bad blood between Thompson and Bruce Cassidy and also Peter DeBoer. Both coaches were his coach in Vegas. Both are assistant coaches for Team Canada. There is no conspiracy there. I just think that speaks volumes of Bruce Cassidy. I think that speaks volumes of Pete DeBoer, that you're willing to look past his body of work just based on a rift for when all three men were involved in Vegas. It just seems childish. It seems ridiculous. And if Logan Thompson just knocks it out of the park to start the season, I will be saying the most wholeheartedly na boo boo right to your face to Bruce Cassidy and Pete DeBoer, saying, how you like me now, how you like Logan Thompson now. Because I don't think he's going to take a step back next season for the Capitals. I don't. And, the thing of it is, I know in his heart of hearts that it means a whole lot to Logan Thompson, just like it meant a whole lot to Tom Wilson. And, Tom Wilson has one foot in the right direction, being at the orientation camp. But like I said in the last episode, it is a deep room and there are a lot of great options in there. But on the netminding aspect of thing, Logan Thompson is better than the three netminders that are going to be at this orientation. Now, if Thompson comes out flying this fall, like I said, and honestly, he probably will, Canada's brass is going to feel the heat. How are you going to answer that? In an interview, if you ask Cassidy, if you ask DeBoer, why did you not select Logan Thompson? They're involved in the decision-making process. Why was Logan Thompson not invited to this orientation camp? And, bigger picture, why was he not invited to join the team for Team Canada for the Olympics? It's going to be a tough thing for them to answer. And you can't, the biggest thing is at a body of work, you got to point to numbers, what kind of numbers they put up. And Logan Thompson is just better. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. So if Logan Thompson is going to be in this thing, like I said, Team Canada, Cassidy, DeBoer, they're really going to have to feel the heat. Our brothers over at Locked On Golden Knights, they are also stirring up this hornet's nest as well. Keep this going online. Let's really put the pressure on Team Canada about what are you doing. Logan Thompson is the guy for Team Canada, and he's being overlooked. I don't think it should stand. But will they actually pivot? I mean, I don't think that's the case. He's got the stats, he's got the resume, but he might not have the allies. Part of it was, I think that, Logan Thompson is a guy that speaks his mind. And he didn't like the way that the goalies were viewed in Vegas, that it was the defense that deserves the credit. It's not the netminders, and just his misutilization. And again, we see what kind of netminder Logan Thompson was, and we see the faith that the Capitals organization has in him, signing him to that long-term contract. So it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing unfolds. But again, I think, our due diligence as, hosts of this show, covering the Capitals, Logan Thompson is here. And like I said, my good friends over at Locked On Golden Knights as well, that let's keep the pressure going. Let's keep this whole thing rolling. Let Team Canada feel the pressure of this, that Logan Thompson is deserving of being there, but he's being overlooked just based on what I'm going to call petty and childish behavior. All right, so coming up here after the break, there is a new coach in Chocolatetown, Derek King, and he's got the resume to back it up. Let's get to know Derek straight ahead. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And that's one of the things I love about Monarch Money is you can kind of drill down on your finances. You can take a look at where you're spending your money wisely and maybe not so wisely. I realized I was spending too much money on sports memorabilia and going out to eat, food delivery, that kind of thing. Now I save more. And also, you take a look at that. I save for retirement. It gives you a wide array of kind of weighing the pros and the cons so you can make better financial decisions. And if you have a significant other in your life as well, you can help plan your financial future together. So do what I did. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking about the new head coach in Hershey, Derek King. And listen, he has the resume to back it up. Former player. He's been the coach in the AHL. He's been an interim coach in the NHL. And some big shoes to fill. I mean, to be honest with you, Todd Nelson, wow, he did wonders for the Hershey Bears organization. And, Calder Cups, the playoffs, there is just so much that he did right. But at the end of the day, we're happy for Todd Nelson. I guess, as a Capitals fan, I don't really love his landing spot, if you know what I mean. But all things considered, he is well deserving of the opportunity that he got, and we wish him nothing but the best. But it is time to turn the page over to the Derek King era in Hershey. So let's dive into that in segment number 2. And what are some of the things about the Hershey Bears is, going to Giants Center, right? It is, for me, when I went there, it felt like an NHL-esque type facility. I had seen other AHL teams, and a lot of those arenas were a far cry. And then just the play that you saw on the ice, it was second to none. So the people that live in the Hershey area or just, in the vicinity, you have a really great and what I'm going to call rare opportunity to see some great hockey. And the next era with Derek King taking over, plus a big influx of new players. It's going to be a really exciting time in Hershey. And the thing that we're noticing about coaches in general is that there is being a lot of importance put on player development, the young players. You saw the new head coach for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Player development was a big thing. And you take a look at Derek King, player development. Of course, it makes sense. The AHL is kind of, a developmental league. It's still pro hockey, one click down from the NHL, but you're still working on your game. So I think they knocked it out of the park. Let's get to know Derek in segment number 2 here. And it was made official. Derek King is the new guy, the new coach in town, the 29th head coach in franchise history following Todd Nelson's departure to Pittsburgh. Now, King, if you follow the AHL or the Blackhawks, should be a familiar name. I recognize the name. I remember him being a coach there as well. He spent 9 years with the Chicago organization, served as the interim head coach for 70 games in the 21-22 season. And before that, 4 seasons with the Rockford Ice Hogs. This guy, and it's going to keep going here for a while. I'm going to break down his history, kind of a get to know what kind of coach he's going to be. His best year in Rockford came in the 2018-2019 season, 29 wins in 64 games. So, to say this guy's been around is an understatement, but that's who you want. You want a qualified coach in there. And you take a look at it, I think there is a tremendous amount of pressure for Hershey to get it right. It is a team that has a long history of doing things the right way. If you take a look at all the Calder Cups that they've won, the proofs in the pudding, that they took a little bit of time to pick the right guy. He's also had a solid NHL career as a player. Also a plus, 830 games with the Islanders, Whalers, Leafs, and Blues. Actually, fun fact, he was teammates with Brian Helmer in St. Louis during the 1999-2000 season. It's one of those small world connections, right? That, I can't believe I knew you. We played together. We coached together. That hockey is just, like a lot of other things, kind of a small family. Now, in the Bears' official release, Helmer said about King, quote, "He's a great communicator, a teacher, and someone who builds culture," unquote. That is the exact guy that we are looking for. And you want to talk about culture, guys. Think back to when Barry Trotz first came to Washington. He was all about changing culture, and he did that. The coach, as a matter of fact, that got the Capitals' only Stanley Cup win up until this point. So a big thing. And, I don't think there's a whole lot of culture that needs to change. Building culture, I think there's some pretty good culture, but, it's going to need to be nurtured and, all that kind of thing. Like I said, there was a lot of players that left Hershey, the AHL in general, for Europe, kind of more than we've seen historically, that it's all about kind of just creating that winning culture that is so familiar in Hershey. That's what you want in Hershey. It's not just about developing winners. It's about shaping guys for the next level. That's what it's all about, and not a knock on the guys that spend their entire career in the AHL. You're still playing pro hockey, but the end all is to one day be an NHLer, and I think that he is the right guy for the job. King also coached in the OHL with the Owen Sound, and got his start way back in the early 2000s with Grand Rapids on the same staff as Todd Nelson. Actually, small full circle, if you know what I mean. King started talking over Hershey, feels like landing a job with an original six team, just based on the history of the Hershey Bears. So saying that it feels like, being a head coach of Hershey is like being the head coach of an original six team. Quite a tip of the hat, quite the accolades heaped onto the Hershey Bears organizations, and kind of just speaks volumes of what Hershey means to him, and the energy that plays well with the fans and players. The rest of the coaching staff staying on board, so we'll see how the group gels. But all things considered, and the name Todd Nelson, when he was on the move, we know he's going to be an assistant with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but a name that was circulated out there for quite some time. There was talk about him being the next head coach of the Dallas Stars, that kind of thing. That the time was right for Nelson to get his job, but also the right opportunity to add yet another great head coach in the long list of great head coaches that have come through Hershey. And I think that Derek King fits that bill. And I'm already excited. I'm excited for Capitals hockey in the fall, but also for the puck drop in Hershey. It is going to be some fun hockey to watch. That much I know for sure. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Holtz, the legend of Holtby, number 70. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment, we're taking a look back on Holtz, Braden Holtby, number 70, the save in the 2018 Stanley Cup win. Listen, you could wind me up and I could go on and on and on about Braden Holtby. And for me, There's been some great netminders in Washington, but for me, it will always be about Braden Holtby right here. That's why I have his jersey hanging on the wall. The many things, just right out of the gate, I remember him getting his opportunity. I think it was Neuwirth getting injured that presented the opportunity. And it was a name I was familiar with. And to be honest with you, the first time I saw him, I'm like, wow, who is this guy out there? I could tell he was different. I've seen, a lot of different goalies get called up over the years, but Holtby was one of the guys that captivated me right out of the gate. And all things considered, his full body of work with the Capitals, I'm also talking Hershey, the Stingrays, all of that. Wow. I mean, like I said, I could go on. And the cool thing about him, and I'll touch on this later, is now that he's getting involved in these camps and developmental leagues and stuff that, you take a look at it at some point, could he be a goalie coach, full time for the Capitals? Maybe, maybe in Hershey or ECHL or maybe the big team. Who knows? The sky is the limit for Holtz. It's just what he wants to do at the end of the day. So let's dive into that in the final segment of the show, talking Holtby. And just, like I said, right out of the gate, he was a guy that really just kind of grabbed a hold of your attention, and one of the most beloved to ever wear a Capitals sweater. It was a great guy on the ice, a great guy in the community. Everyone liked him. I think that, you'd be hard pressed to find a single person out there to say a negative thing about Braden Holtby. Kind of falls in that same category of TJ Oshie, just an easygoing guy. So let's talk about the full ride. Holtby's journey starts in the minors all the way back in 2009. If you can think back, bouncing between Carolina and the Hershey Bears. And right out of the gate, you could tell he was different. Quite a goalie. He was dominant. Hershey won 24 of 37 games, posted a .917 save percentage. And the feeling was there that he was going to be the next great netminder. Okay, jump forward a year, 2010. He's making his NHL debut, beats the Bruins in relief, has to come out of the bullpen, then starts 2 nights later, wins at OT. And all of a sudden, Michael Neuwirth at one time was kind of the hot hand, in the net for the Capitals. But all of a sudden, he made it interesting. And, you think back, that goes back. That was kind of like Vokoun, that era back then, that Holtby definitely changed everything. Then, of course, the magical 2012 playoff run. That's where he made his name. Steps in for injured Vokoun, and Neuwirth, 22 years old, and takes the Bruins to 7, wins Game 7 in OT. And by that point, it was pretty clear that he was going to be the netminder for the foreseeable future for the Capitals. And fast forward to 2015, he records 41 wins, ties Ole Kolzig's single-season record. The next year, 48 wins, ties Martin Brodeur, all-time NHL record, wins the Vezina Trophy. And I think everyone in Washington was drinking the Holtby Kool-Aid. But it was a build. It kept getting better and better and better. And then the interesting scenario back in 2018 that Holtby was the hot hand, but he faltered a little bit in the latter half of the season, as I can recall. And a really great tandem that year, as it was Philip Grubauer and Braden Holtby. And to be clear here, Holtz was lights out, but if it wasn't for Grubauer coming in clutch when they needed him, I don't know if it would have gone quite where we thought it was going to go. But, from 2015 to 2018, no goalie in the NHL was more reliable. Underline that, boldface, highlighter. 15 to 18, no goalie in the NHL was more reliable. Fond memories in my Capitals past, of course. And like I said, 2018, the Cinderella story was this team that could never get over the hump and win a Stanley Cup. They did that. Something that hung over Alex Ovechkin for years, that, you're a great goal scorer, you're this. And, the Capitals are a good regular season team, and they're good in like the first couple rounds of the playoffs, but they don't have what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. Well, Braden Holtby did that. In large part, that was him. That was a magical time in Capitals history. The Cup run, back-to-back shutouts in Games 6 and 7 against Tampa, and the final, the save, will forever be etched in my mind. Sprawling stick save on Alex Tuch with 2 minutes left in Game 2. Where were you, Caps fans? Where were you? You know, it kind of takes you back right now. I can see it in the theater of my mind right now. Quite a moment. Iconic. That play, that's on every Capitals highlight reel until the end of time. I'd like to think this team can win another Stanley Cup, but, you know, that for me, in my fandom of the Capitals, will be that highlight reel that's playing in my head in perpetuity, and that was Braden Holtby. Holtby finishes the Cup run with 16 wins, a .922 save percentage, and a 2.16 goals against. Didn't win the Conn Smythe. Ovi did, but he easily could have. Then after 10 years in Washington, things started to change. The guy that was the rock star, Braden Holtby, did see, a bit of decline in his play. And the unthinkable thing happened. He signs with Vancouver back in 2020, plays back up to Thatcher Demko. Not great, sub 900 save percentage, but to be clear here, that was not the best Canucks team that we'd ever seen on the ice. Then he goes to Dallas, 1-year deal. Strong start, becomes the fastest goalie in NHL history to reach 293 wins in 500 games, but the injuries hit. Placed on the LTIR, misses the entire 22-23 season, and hasn't played yet. Now, he has not formally played since then. That's been quite some time. Misses the entire 22-23 season, hasn't played since. And the thing of it is, he has not officially retired, but I think it's, a safe thing to say that his playing days are behind him. I don't think he needs to come out and say I'm retiring when you miss a season like that and you haven't been out on the ice for quite some time, trying to try out for a team. I think he understands where he's at. But, here's the best part for me, is that he's still around the Capitals organization. He's mentoring goalies at development and rookie camps, working with the ECHL prospects down in Carolina. We saw him at the development camp here not long ago, helping them learn the system to build confidence. And one of the best, to do it, that's for sure. He's not a full-time coach, but he's involved, and that is huge because Holtz is a Capital forever. And it's one of those things. It kind of just gets the emotions keyed up a little bit, and when you start talking about that, and I hate to be the guy that hangs on to the 2018 season like it was yesterday, and I still have goals for this team to do great things, but it's also sometimes fun to kind of reminisce back and think about great times in Capitals history. And Braden Holtby, again, if that's not in the mantle of your mind, the save, forever, then I don't know what will, because Braden Holtby, like I said, it was the mix of the perfect characters in 2018. And I don't want to just isolate him to, being really good in 2018. He was good for a large stretch of time there. But wow, a guy that totally changed it between the pipes for the Capitals, Braden Holtby. A tip of the hat goes out to him. My favorite Capitals goalie, my favorite, I'm going to go ahead and say it here, my favorite NHL goalie of all time. Here's to you, Holtz. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week. Available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holtby, and I'll talk to you again next time.